I want to thank you all for your support of our elections process. We are operating in a very unusual time, a time that's been challenging for all of us, and we appreciate your service in this process. For most of you that have done this for years and years, you're well aware that we cannot organize and administer an election without quality election workers and folks that are dedicated to this process. And although my words might not mean very much, I want you to understand that we are grateful for your service in this process. We are putting things in place to do our best to protect not only you, but to protect the public that will be voting on the date of the primary runoff. And we're going to go through all that with you today. I'm really today going to focus on covering some highlights, things that I feel are critical that you need to know, some challenges on election day, as well as the use of all the safety supplies and materials that we're putting in place for you, and our closing procedure. Based on the training you've received from us in the past, I think that's going to be sufficient. We're going to have a second video available to you that Shelby's going to do about using the iPad. There's also some instructional videos being provided from the Secretary of State's office. Now, there are some differences. We have requirements here in Madison County that are not necessarily implemented throughout the state. And when Shelby talks to you later today, she'll provide the information so you're well aware of the differences between the information we provide and the Secretary of State's office provides you. Keep in mind, we're not asking you to do anything that is not permitted by law. In general, we go above and beyond what state code requires of us. So that's where things will differ, okay? So to hit some highlights for you, I want to remind you that if you're working outside of your home precinct in this election, you will need to cast an absentee ballot. The deadline for application is July the 9th. I would highly recommend that if you're working outside of your precinct that you vote absentee as soon as possible. Don't wait until the 9th to request a ballot. Although your request would be fulfilled, it would have to be postmarked by July the 13th. And so you have a very short window to turn that around. So if you're working outside of your home precinct, please ensure that you cast your absentee ballot. You can come to the courthouse and do that in person, or request one now and do it completely by mail. If you have questions about the absentee process, please call 256-532-3684, 256-532-3684. If you need an excuse for work or any other obligation due to your service in this process, simply email Shelby Wallace. And by the way, although I didn't mention it, all the information that I'm going over with you is available in the PowerPoint that will be posted with this video. We need to have your request in advance. If you need a letter from me excusing you from work or another obligation, simply email Shelby and we'll ensure that's included in your payroll package. So I already mentioned a few things that we're going to cover: challenges, COVID-19 precautions. We're going to talk about provisional ballots, flash drives, talk about our closing procedure, and getting things back to the courthouse, and then we'll again have a second session on the iPad. Although I'm not covering everything in this PowerPoint with you today, I encourage you to go through it, look through it, and refresh yourself. Other than dates and ballot style changes, there's not a lot of change from this to what you received in our last training session, but please go through it and refresh yourself on our entire process. Some challenges for primary election day is a change in polling location, just one. For those of you in precinct 31, we were voting at the Baraka Gymnasium, and we have voted at that facility for many years. But due to the construction going on at that location, we have had to move that polling location. There's no change in precinct lines. It's simply a move to a different facility. And you're actually right across the street. You'll be at St. Matthew's Primitive Baptist Church, which is at 3200 Sparkman Drive. And every voter in that precinct has received notification via mail. It's been publicly posted, and so everything should be in good order. We'll provide special signage that day that'll be placed at the old location, redirecting voters to the correct location. But the beauty of the change is that, again, it is directly across the street from the old polling location. So if folks have to be redirected, it won't be a long distance or very hard to redirect individuals. Voter identification still is a challenge, even though law around required identification changed. I simply want to remind you that it must be government issued, it must have a photo, and it must be current, meaning that it can't be expired. The only exception to an expiration date will be a driver's license. A driver's license is good for 60 days past expiration. And so if it's within that 60-day window, it can certainly be accepted. But remember, government issued, must have a photo, and must be current, okay? And there's a full list in your packet that mirrors the list on our website and what's outlined in state code. Remember that if a voter does not possess a valid form of identification, that they may vote if 2 or more election workers will sign an affidavit attesting to that they know in fact who that person is. And if they don't have identification available and 2 workers cannot attest to the identity of that individual, then they'll vote a provisional ballot. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Ballot styles for this election, actually very simple, which I know we're all thankful for. There actually are only 3 styles countywide. Every precinct will have an R1 ballot style. The only differential among ballot styles will be precincts in County Commission District 1 and County Commission District 6. In County Commission District 1, there will be an R2 style because there is a runoff in a commission race in that district. In Commission District 6, there will be a D1 ballot style in addition to the R1 style. And that D1 style will be for the runoff, that will include the race for the runoff between the candidates for commissioner in that district. So 3 styles, R1, R2, and that R1 and R2 will only be available in County Commission District 1, and then R1 and D1 only in County Commission District 6. Everywhere else, just that one ballot style. So it makes voting and processing voters much easier. I'm going to talk to you now about COVID-19 precautions, things that you need to ensure that are in place at your polling location. I'm going to go through all the things that are provided to you and the protocol that we're asking you to follow. Should you have any questions about COVID-19 precautions and the procedures we've put in place, please don't hesitate to email Shelby or call Shelby so we can clarify anything and provide you with additional information you might need. Now, I'm doing this cold today. There's no rehearsal. I'm very comfortable speaking to you all. It feels very odd not having an audience, so I might stumble through going through some of these items because, well, we haven't had to use them before. But I fully anticipate that, of course, these are going to be in place for the municipal election. City officials are working to have these materials in place for you, and I have no doubt when we get to a general election that we'll still be using these materials. So the more frequently I go through them and talk to you about them, the more comfortable I'll be with them as well. But a lot of it's common sense, but I'm going to walk you through what we're providing so you're aware of what you'll have available to you. The first thing, election workers are going to be provided with a 3-ply mask. You will all be given a quantity sufficient for your polling location. Now, most of you, just like at my house and many of my staff here at the courthouse, you've had your own mask made, you've got your own mask in some form, and that's perfectly acceptable, but we will provide some to you if you need one. All election workers will also receive a face shield. This has to be worn in addition to a 3-ply mask, and it's adjustable, so you can suit it or you can size it to suit the size of your head. Obviously, I'm a big boy, so I'm going to need it will take a little more room for me, but you'll be able to customize this so it fits you properly, and we would highly recommend that you wear this, and of course you have to wear a mask, okay? You will also be provided disposable gloves that you can use throughout the day. I would recommend that you use them and that you rotate through them as frequently as you feel necessary. We will have additional supplies available, so if you run out of something, run low on something, feel like you need more of something, you can simply let us know and we'll ensure that those are provided to you. I want you to keep in mind that voters will be required to wear a mask into the polling location. This information will be provided to the media. It will be on all of our social media, on our website, but it will be required. So if a voter shows up without a mask, we will have some on hand so you can provide that voter with a mask while they are in the polling location. You'll have disinfectant supplies that can be used throughout the day. You're going to all receive a quantity of disinfectant wipes. And we've had to order many of these things in bulk. We actually are very fortunate that the Sheriff's Office has been most helpful in helping us procure supplies. The County Commission Office, Chairman Dell Strong, has been instrumental in getting us things. It's very hard for most folks to order. So some of them are very plain looking because of the way they're being produced now. They're having to be produced so quickly that they're not packaged in a way that you might see them on your grocery store shelves or at your Walmart or Costco. But you'll have a container of disinfectant wipes to wipe down pens. Stylus is used for the iPads, door handles, any surface that you're working on or that someone's touching repeatedly. You'll have a quantity of these to clean up throughout the day. You'll also have a container of disinfectant spray, which looks like this, and it will be you'll have a pump that's provided to you with it. You'll also have paper towels that you can use to wipe down tables and voting booths. Okay. I feel like I'm on the news sitting at this table. It's a very odd thing that I'm not walking around in front of you. The other thing that you'll receive will be hand sanitizer. You can't get hand sanitizer in the quantity that we need in small containers. We can never get enough of those to supply you. So in your supply kit, you will actually receive 2 gallons of hand sanitizer. There will be 2 of these in your supply kit, okay? This is not a concentrate, but it's very powerful. It's not like what you would pull off the grocery store shelf or what you would buy at a box store. So we ask that you fill up this bottle so that it's used it's used well and not wasted. So you'll be provided with this so you can place someone, an election worker, at the entrance to your polling location, and they can actually apply it for voters, okay? Because 1 squirt, 1 pump of this is going to be enough for someone to disinfect their hands, okay? Again, if you run low on something, let us know, but don't just sit this out. Now, we will provide a pump so that it's easy for you to put this into the spray bottle. But again, don't set this out for voters to use because it will go quickly. You will certainly run out. Use the spray bottle, please, and station a worker at the door to ensure that hands are sprayed, okay? We're also going to provide you with some additional signage for your polling location. The first sign that I think is the most important, and this is the information that will be conveyed to our media outlets and will be available on social media and on our websites, will be this sign. And I'm going to cover myself up for a moment, but you can see what is listed here. And so this one needs to be positioned outside the door at your polling location. And it reminds voters that these guidelines are in place to protect the public and our election workers, and that they're to be compliant. A mask or face covering shall be worn at all times while in the polling location. Voters must sanitize their hands upon entry. Voters must maintain a distance of 6 feet. And we're going to encourage voters to bring their own pen or marking device for the ballots. Of course, we're going to provide pens and marking devices for them to use, but we encourage them to bring their own. Remember that with our Smart Mark technology on voting machines, any marking device will work. From a pencil to a quill pen, it will work as long as it's not transparent. So you can't mark your ballot with, say, a highlighter. But if it's a solid ink, no matter what it is, it will be used, or a lead pencil is perfectly fine as well. But we're going to encourage voters to bring their own marking device. So you'll have one of these signs to put outside the entry into your polling location. The other things that we'll provide you, just to make things a little simpler, is a reminder that without masks, there's no entry into your polling location. We're treating your polling locations like we're treating the courthouse, and so you will be required to wear a mask, and this is reminding the voters as well. We'll also be providing you with entrance-only and exit-only signs. You might have to reroute traffic and do some things in your polling location to get people in one door and out another door that you have not done in the past. Those will be also available to you. Some additional supplies to cover with you. You'll receive 3 additional styluses for each poll pad that will allow sanitation between each use. You'll receive alcohol pads that you can use to wipe down the iPad screen. They look like this, very similar to what you might use in your first aid kit or what you might use to clean your glasses, but a sanitization wipe that's individually packaged so you can wipe down screens. We're also providing door stops. I know that seems pretty elementary and simple. This will allow you to prop open doors, entry doors, or any door that a voter might have to enter through to avoid them touching a handle or touching a surface repeatedly. So please use those. You'll receive 2 labeled baskets that have clean and used written on them. I think you can probably see those. This will allow you to sanitize pens that are being used in your polling location and know which are dirty and which have been cleaned and can be reused. You'll also receive, and you've received this for some time, but you'll receive more than you have in the past, you'll receive duct tape and blue tape that can be used. Of course, we provide it in a lime green and, of course, the blue painter's tape that you can use to mark off 6-foot points within your polling location, maybe mark areas that you don't want folks to go past, but you'll have additional tapes available to you so you can mark the floor or provide guidelines based on the setup of your polling location. A couple things I've already mentioned, but I want to go through with you in detail again. Each polling location needs to station 1 election worker inside the door of the facility to control the flow of traffic, to make sure the voters' hands are sanitized, and to ensure that a voter has on a mask. Again, use the hand sanitizer with the spray bottle, apply that for them, and ensure they have a mask. If they don't, please offer them one. Poll pad check-in line should be limited to one voter at a station per time. So you're going to mark those 6 feet off behind your check-in stations, only one person at a time at that station. All other voters will need to wait outside of the room where the voting occurs. So again, mark out those 6 feet, but folks don't need to crowd in. They've got to maintain that 6-foot distance. Each precinct will receive a reduced number of poll pads because of social distancing. You should only set up one poll pad per table. And in the event that it's necessary to take the voter's ID, you want to make sure you have the voter place the ID on the table to avoid direct contact with the voter. Election workers should avoid touching any of the voter's personal items if possible. Okay? Again, you will have your gloves. Gloves are not effective if they're not changed. And so you see folks using the same glove over and over and over again when they're touching something they're taking from a member of the public. Those need to be changed with frequency if you're having to do that. So have folks place their ID down so you can look at it. If it needs to be reviewed, don't take it from them. So reduce handling things to the extent, that you can. I know that you've probably already thought through this. We're so proud of the work that our inspectors do, but think about how you position everything in your polling location. Voting booths need to be 6 feet apart. You need to limit the number of chairs at each table. So if you've got a 6-foot table, and normally you maybe would put 2 chairs on each side, you really can put only 1 chair on each end of each side of that table. You can only put 2 folks at that table. Wipe down surfaces repeatedly throughout the day, and also sanitize the AutoMark machine after it has been used. Okay? Of course, you'll be aware when that's been used. Protection procedures around your voting machine. You want to mark out 6 feet from the line where folks will cast their ballot. Again, mark that out with an X on the floor. Your ballot counter clerk will be there to ensure that folks maintain that distance of 6 feet. Don't take the ballot from the voter. Let the voter insert that ballot in the machine. Again, limit anything you might have to touch that voter has had in his or her hands. Collect any used pens in the used pen basket, which we're providing to you. And then sanitize tables and surfaces throughout the day, including those pens. And you can use the clean pen basket to return your clean pens back to your check-in points where ballots are provided to voters. Closing procedures, some things that you haven't had to do in the past. You want to make sure that your laminated signs we're providing you, the entrance and exit signs, the no mask, no entry signs, are placed back in the manila envelope that they're in. We want to reuse those. Those are expensive to produce. So put those back in the envelope they're provided to you in. Wipe down everything that's been used in the polling location, the tables, chairs that would have been touched, the tops of the backs of chairs, equipment. Wipe everything down and package it back up the way it was delivered to your location. If you have used a part of the church's facility that day, a break area, wipe down the counters, wipe down the chair or tables that you have used maybe in a break area. You want to place all face shields, used and unused, and we will use these again. They'll be sanitized before they're used in the next election. So package everything back up in the bag or the box that they came in, and ensure all of these materials are put back into one of your black and yellow plastic bins. Please do this though on all of the liquid items that are provided to you, whether it's hand sanitizer, the disinfectant spray, the sanitization wipes. Make sure that the containers are closed securely. We don't want to pick up boxes full of liquid. We don't want to ruin any equipment or other materials that will be in those boxes with these supplies. So make sure that they are securely fastened when you package back up for the night. And remember, we'll talk about closing procedures later, but none of the black containers, the black and yellow containers that have these supplies, you will not have to bring these back with you to the courthouse. Our crew will pick those up the morning after the election. I want to remind you, everything for this election was actually printed for a March 31st runoff. And to avoid unnecessary expense, nothing has been reproduced. So all of your ballots, all of your materials, everything that you'll receive for this election has already been marked with March the 31st. We were ready with materials and supplies for the 31st, but for good reason, we moved this to July. We're thankful that happened. But don't let that confuse you. Don't let it throw off a voter. We've had lots of questions about that, but your ballots and all materials will still say March 31. Please understand they're still valid. Everything will function just fine. with the supplies with that date and the machine programmed with that election date. As I already mentioned to you, we're going to do our best to provide this information to the media on all of the precautions we have put in place and what you're being provided for your own safety as well as the safety of the voter. But again, to remind you of what we'll be telling voters to do, voters will be required to wear a mask that covers their face or their nose and their mouth when entering a polling location. Voters must sanitize their hands upon entry. Everyone must maintain 6 feet of social distance. Voters are going to be encouraged to bring their own marking device. And unfortunately, depending on turnout, you can anticipate a longer wait at polling locations because of social distancing and the ability to only let a certain number of people into a facility at one time. So we're going to let them know that things could be slower. Okay? If you have questions about any of the PPE, the personal protection equipment we are providing to you, or any part of the process, refer back to your printed materials if I've missed something, read through these several times, and also don't hesitate to call or email if you have additional questions. I'm going to talk to you quickly about provisional ballots. I know that none of you like provisional ballots, but they're part of the process, and you've got to handle these correctly. I want to remind you that there are 4 situations where a voter would vote a provisional ballot. Their name does not appear on the voters list. They demand to vote in a precinct where they are not registered. They don't have acceptable identification, or they have moved and not updated their registration. So let's talk about a voter's name not being on the voters list. Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you. If their name is not on the list, they're not registered. I mean, that's the short of it. And so if a voter's name does not appear, you need to call the Board of Registrars and determine if there is some error, but receive guidance from the Board of Registrars. They need to document that that individual is going to vote a provisional and go through the provisional voting process with them. In your provisional supply kit, you'll receive a set of instructions for provisional ballots. There is no shame in using that the guidelines that are provided, the instructions in that packet, every time you process one. It ensures that you're getting everything in proper order. You might have a voter scoff at that. Remind them, ma'am, sir, I'm going through these instructions with you. I'm going through them myself to ensure that this is processed correctly and that so your vote can be counted. But again, if their name does not appear on the list, you'll need to call the Board of Registrars. You can tell the voter, ma'am, sir, you're not registered to vote in Madison County. We're glad to process this provisional ballot for you. We're required by law to do that. But ma'am, sir, you're not registered and it will not be counted. But if they insist on casting a provisional, then it's our duty to ensure that they have the opportunity to do that. Voters demand to vote in a precinct where they are not, where they do not reside or are not registered. That's number 2. That happens frequently about 5 minutes till 7 on election day. You'll have someone that's forgotten or their schedule is run tight and they pull in to the closest voting location to where they happen to be and they demand to vote. Well, in that situation, they're not going to be able to vote a regular ballot. They'll have to vote a provisional. State law requires that you cast your ballot in the precinct where you reside. So they can cast a provisional ballot, but again, you'll need to remind them, ma'am, sir, we're glad to process this. We're required by law to do so, but since you are not in the precinct where you reside and where you're registered, this will not be counted. You can tell them that, but again, if that voter insists that they want to cast a provisional, again, you'll want to process that for them. The third situation is likely the most common. A voter doesn't have identification. Well, hopefully, especially if you've been working at your polling location for a number of years, it will be someone that you're familiar with, and there'll be 2 election workers that can confirm the identity of that voter. But if that's not the case, it could be as simple as that voter going back to their car for identification. Encourage them to do that. We want to ensure that everyone gets to cast their ballot in the voting machine, that it's tabulated while they're present, and avoid using the provisional process if we can. Encourage them to go back to their car or even run back home to get identification if that's necessary. Now, if a voter is voting a provisional ballot for lack of identification, they will have to provide that identification to the Board of Registrars by 4:30 on the Friday following the election. The follow-up on that is very, very rare. Those ballots that are cast, those provisional ballots cast for lack of ID, it's very rare that our Board of Registrars sees follow-up from those voters. And if they don't follow up to confirm their identification or their identity, then their ballot will not be counted. So encourage them to simply go back to their car or run back home and come back so they can vote a regular ballot. That's the third. The fourth and final is the voter has moved. And there are two scenarios with a voter having moved. If a voter has moved and they have not updated their registration, you're going to have them complete an update form. Now, you will have to look at that update form and determine, is that new address within your polling location or your precinct? If in fact it is, they'll vote a regular ballot. Their update form will be processed by the Board of Registrars after the election, and all will be well. But if they've moved and they're no longer in your polling location or in your precinct, you'll have to send them to the correct precinct. Because again, as I mentioned to you, it is required by law that you cast your ballot in the precinct where you reside. And so if someone's moved and they have moved out of the precinct they were in, they'll have to go to the correct precinct to cast their ballot. You're familiar with the provisional ballot pink slip we provide. I would also encourage you to write down as much information you can so that it is helpful to the inspector where they're going to vote. We also provide you with a phone list that has all inspectors' telephone numbers. I would encourage you to call ahead and let the inspector at the other location know that Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith is coming to vote. They moved into your precinct, they're going to have their pink slip, and they'll need to be processed using a provisional ballot. Now, in that situation, there's no doubt that a provisional ballot would in fact count, okay? So again, if they have moved and they're still within your precinct and they cast a regular ballot, if they have moved and they are not in your precinct, you'll send them to the correct precinct to cast their ballot. Many people ask me about checking addresses on identification. We don't do that. Identification is in place to ensure that the individual that's voting is in fact who they say they are. You cannot take the time to verify everyone's address. Now, if you're aware someone has moved, that's a different story. Or if someone self-identifies. And you guys, it's hard to interact with you like this because you usually have an audience instead of just a camera. But it kind of happens where a voter will walk up and go, well, Sue, you know I've moved, but I'm going to vote here today anyway. Well, you can't allow them to do that. You've got to verify that address. Is that new address, again, in your precinct, or is it in a different precinct? Again, if it's inside the precinct lines, their new home, they vote a regular ballot, you do the update form. But again, if they've moved, you have to send them to the correct location. If you have any questions about the provisional balloting process, need clarification, again, don't hesitate to call or email us. We are glad to assist you. Don't forget that the Sheriff's Office will be picking up flash drives that go into the number 10 envelope shortly after 7 o'clock. Now, if you're ready to go before you've seen a Sheriff's deputy, we ask that you just simply call the non-emergency number for the Sheriff's Office and let them know that, hey, the deputy hasn't shown up, we're ready to go back to the courthouse, and we'll be bringing our own envelope number 10 back in with us. Remember, if you have more than one voting machine and you only use one machine, you still have to process reports and pull the flash drive from that second machine. Every machine's flash drive has to come back along with a report to the courthouse. Contact information has not changed. It's available to you in the PowerPoint presentation that is going to again be posted along with this video. One of the things, and Shelby might mention this to you again in the video regarding iPads, we require that you report at 6 a.m. instead of 6:30. So please make sure you're at your polling location no less than an hour in advance of opening. You've heard my story many times about my first year running elections in Madison County as the elections administrator, where we had a water leak in a church. Everything was set up the night before, everything was in perfect order, and you come in that morning at 5 minutes till 7 and there's water in the floor, your ballots are wet. We cannot remedy that situation in 30 minutes. Keep in mind, in Madison County, the polling location farthest from the courthouse is about a 40 to 45 minute drive up in the northwest corner of the county. And so we have to have enough time to respond. Hopefully you're over prepared, you get there at 6, you have time for coffee, you have time to settle in for the day, and you don't have an emergency to deal with. But we need that hour, it's very, very important. I'm going to slide through some of these things without covering them because we've covered them with such great frequency. But again, I encourage you to look through the PowerPoint that's provided and read through it at least once to ensure that you're refreshed and ready to go. All of you like to be paid. Please fill out your payroll forms that will be provided in your supply kit. Please fill them out thoroughly, provide every piece of information we've asked for. Please understand we treat your sensitive information with great care. That's why a deputy comes and picks that up from you in a sealed envelope. It's returned directly to my office. Shelby Wallace is the only person in my office that processes or has access to those forms. They're locked up. When we transfer those forms to our payroll department, they're also provided directly to one individual. They're also protected within their office. We do our best to protect your personal information, so don't hesitate to provide us with that. Now, when someone comes to pick up that envelope, make sure that it's a sheriff's deputy or a member of my staff. And the only members of my staff that would pick it up directly from you would be Shelby Wallace or me. And you can trust us with that, okay? Make sure you complete those. Shelby is going to talk in a few minutes about the poll pad and social distancing and go through those procedures with you, which I feel are very important. But I'm going to go through and talk about closing procedures. Closing procedures are extremely important, and I want to ensure that we do our best job to get everything back to us in good order. It's very difficult when things are returned at the end of the night and we're missing something or things are not in good order, and I feel it's important to go through closing procedures. One thing I've missed that I do want to talk about is voting assistance. I want you to keep in mind we had a review by the Department of Justice in our primary election regarding accessibility, regarding the ability of election workers to pivot, if you will, and to help voters that have a special need or need assistance in voting. So I want to talk briefly about that, and then we'll go into the closing procedures. Keep in mind, anyone can require assistance to vote if they choose. In most situations, a voter that needs assistance is going to bring someone with them, and it could be their spouse, a child, a family friend. Keep in mind, if a voter is using someone or having someone assist them, that assistant, whoever's assisting them, needs to sign in with them on the poll pad. They can ask you for assistance, and it's perfectly acceptable for you to help them. Let's say someone has a severe tremor or a vision issue, any type of mobility issue, and they need your help in marking a ballot, putting a ballot in a machine. You are certainly welcome to do that. What I would caution you to do is to be very systematic in how you assist someone. Now, there are not a lot of items on the ballot in this runoff election, but if they're asking you to mark their ballot, make sure you're very careful about marking it, showing it to them, ensuring that they confirm that's the selection they've made, and go through that in a very systematic way. And if at all possible, make sure they're the ones that get to feed that ballot into the voting machine so that you don't take it from them and feed it for them. They need to see that that in fact happens. It's very important that you have your AutoMark machine set up and ready to go. You don't need to leave it in its container, not set up the table until it's needed. It needs to be set up and used and available for someone the minute it's asked for. It needs to be in a easily accessed location, and if it's not working or there's a problem, please call our office so we can bring you a replacement. What I would encourage you to do, if you haven't done it before, is to use the AutoMark machine yourself. It's very intuitive, and if you're uncomfortable with it or don't know much about it, vote your own ballot, mark your own ballot using the AutoMark machine. I would encourage every inspector and at least a few workers in your polling location to do that because it lets you see how the machine operates. Please understand that someone that might need to use that machine generally is very familiar with it. My office has done a very good job of interacting with, as an example, the Alabama Institute for the Blind and other organizations that help individuals with some limitations in voting. We provide them with equipment, we train them, we go to any opportunity they provide for us to do training, we attend so that they're comfortable with the equipment that we have available for them. So make sure that is out. A few other things related to assistance that I think is important. In the state of Alabama, if you've attained the age of 70, you are entitled to move to the front of the line. So if someone asks to move to the front of the line because of their age, simply let them. I will tell you, and most of you have heard this before, there's not a lady in my family that would lie about their age to get to the front of a line. So if someone asks to move to the front of the line because of their age, simply allow it. They might not look 70. They, in fact, might not be 70. But it's not our place to question that. And if someone wants to use that excuse and, in fact, they're not 70, then that's on them. That's not on us. Just allow them simply to move to the front of the line. It doesn't hurt to be helpful to folks. If you see someone in line that's struggling to stand, maybe they're using a cane or a walker or another device to help in their mobility, offer them the opportunity, because if someone is disabled, they're certainly welcome to come to the front of the line. Offer them that opportunity if they're not taking it. Ma'am, sir, we'd be glad to move you to the front of the line. We can put you at a table. We'll be glad to assist you. Now, please understand, in the number of years that I've done this, I find that any individual with a limitation usually wants to be treated just like everyone else and doesn't want to take that opportunity, but we should be kind enough to offer it and let them know we're there to assist them if in fact they need that kind of assistance. So don't hesitate to offer that. It could be as simply as they're waiting and they need a chair to sit in. Offer that to them. Go above and beyond to try to help folks that are struggling to make it into vote. Try to put yourself in that situation. So if someone needs assistance, treat them the way you'd like to be treated if in fact you needed some help to cast your ballot. If you have any questions about accessibility, the use of the AutoMark, attaining the age of 70, if someone has a disability that requires them to move to the front of the line, simply let us know. We'll be glad to clarify any questions you might have. Now, what I've promised to get to is closing procedures. Remember, we close polling locations at 7 p.m. There aren't any exceptions to that. However, if you have a line at 7, everybody in line at 7 p.m. is entitled to vote. I would encourage you, if space allows it, that you move that line of voters into the polling location. But depending on the size of that line and the space available, especially with social distancing that's being required, you might not be able to do that. So place an election worker at the end of that line so that it doesn't grow or the line doesn't change, if you will, for those folks that are waiting. But again, if you have a line at 7, they're entitled to vote. No one can show up at 7:05 and get in that line, okay? You want to shut down your equipment as soon as the last ballot has been cast. You want to make sure that you do that. It takes a long period of time for all the required reports to run, and those can be running while you're packaging up the remainder of the items for your polling location. Now, to go into specifics, provisional ballots, your provisional ballot box, and all of the supplies have to be returned whether someone used them or not. Make sure that your PB4 envelope is returned. If no one cast a provisional ballot, simply write none across the face of your roster books and place those in the PB4 envelope for return. If someone cast a provisional ballot, place the PB3 forms and the rosters in that PB4 for return. And again, on provisionals, if you have questions, please call us. We'd much rather assist you in helping you get everything in line and getting everything in order than to have an issue that we can't resolve once all of your paperwork is back to the courthouse. Follow the yellow list. You'll see that in the PowerPoint presentation, and we reference it many times in our training. But if you follow this list, everything that you need to put in order will be in proper order when you return to the courthouse. The simple thing to remember is that if it's a piece of paper, you're required to bring it back with you. And I'm going to go through that in detail. Some things to help you throughout the day to prepare for your closing is to take all of your supplies out of your supply kit and organize them based on this list. And at the end of the evening, go through each of these systematically, label every envelope, put the correct document in every envelope, the correct report in every envelope, but don't seal anything. Go through it, put everything in order, and then go back through a second time and check everything. Don't seal it the second time. Go back through and check every item a second time. Once you've gone through it a second time, then you can seal your envelopes, seal your boxes, and make sure that things are put in order. Once you return these items to us, we cannot open a container, an envelope, a box of voted ballots, your record of elections box. We can't open any of those containers without a court order. So please follow this list very carefully to ensure things are in the proper order when you bring them back to the courthouse. Some specific things to remind you of when packing this up is to box the brown and bag the white, and you've got it right. Remember, your white envelopes go in your plastic bag. That plastic bag could be clear or possibly a white bag, but all of your white envelopes go in the plastic bag, and all of your brown envelopes go in the brown record of elections box. Remember that in addition to your record of elections box and your plastic bag, you'll need to bring back with you your boxes of voted ballots, your boxes of unused ballots, and any other paper materials that you have at your polling location need to be returned when you come to the courthouse. The key item, the critical item as well, are the poll pads. Keep in mind that's a huge sensitive database that's available on those poll pads. you want to make sure that you return each and every poll pad that's provided to you, okay? So remember, your record of elections box, your box of unused ballots, your boxes of unused ballots, your box of voted ballots, your provisional box, and your poll pads must be returned. And remember, follow this list, okay? Go through it very carefully. Now, if you have questions on closing procedures, do not hesitate to call us. Please know this, when you call, we're glad to assist you. We know that working a 14, 15, 16-hour day to operate a polling location, something that's very simple in the morning can be very difficult late at night after you've had such a long day. Don't hesitate to call if we can walk you through it, but know this, we're going to pull out the same list. I'm going to ask you where your yellow list is, I'm going to pull mine out, and I'm going to walk through it with you, okay? If you have questions, concerns, or need additional information about this elections process, as I've mentioned multiple times today, don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you have questions about social distancing, setting up your polling location, using any of the personal protection items that we have provided to you and for voters, don't hesitate to call. We want you to feel comfortable. Again, I want to thank you for your service in this process. As I've mentioned before, it would be impossible for us to run a quality election without workers like you, workers that are devoted to the process, that want to do a good job. I hope that as we prepare for our general election in November, that we can all be together again. I love to see you. I appreciate each of you and appreciate the support you give to this office. When we receive compliments or any letter of gratitude or a kind comment about the work we do in elections, I always do my best to throw that back to you all. Again, you're a critical component in what we do. We could not do it without you. Again, posted along with this video will be the PowerPoint presentation that covers every step of the process. I encourage you once again to read through that, print it out, make sure that you're familiar with it. You'll have another video from Shelby Wallace that will go through all of the poll pad procedures. She'll also discuss any differences between the additional videos from the Secretary of State's office and our office to clarify those points with you. And then the videos I've mentioned from the Secretary of State will be posted as well. We'd ask that you use all of that information that's available to you to be well prepared for the July runoff. Again, if you have questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to us. It's a pleasure to serve you. I'm accountable to you. I appreciate your feedback, your constructive criticism. This office wants to do a job that every member of our community is proud of. Thank you so much, and here's to a great election day in July.
Hello, my name is Shelby Wallace, and I am the Elections Administrator for Madison County. My contact information is in the PowerPoint. If you've got any questions about anything that we have covered or will cover, please feel free to let me know so that I can assist you in any way possible. As Judge Barger said, we are very grateful for the way that you choose to serve your community by being an election worker. I am going to run through the poll pad and just a few quick reminders at the end. So we'll start with the poll pad. So just a reminder of the components. You've got your printer, and it'll come with a little test receipt in it. You can just tear that off. It's how we test it and we make sure it's working. You'll also have your iPad in the top, the base components, as well as your plugs. I'm going to leave these in the case, but they're in the bottom of the circle component. Your ID tray, the two green styluses. We're going to recommend that you keep these for you to use during your check-in process so that they're yours. They're not passed back and forth to the voter. And you'll also receive rubber banded together 3 colorful styluses that you can use for voter use as they touch the screen. You'll also receive your green poll pad charger that's in the case. You'll need to pull that out and plug it in. As a reminder, your iPads are going to come to you charged. They don't all have to be plugged in at one time. I know sometimes plugging in that plug space is kind of sacred in your polling location. You can alternate them. They're not all going to just die at one time. You can switch them out, give each one an hour or so, get it above maybe 60-70% and switch it out to something else. So let's walk through setting up the printer. As a reminder, you're going to plug in your printer to power. The little component is back here. If you're looking at it, it's on the right side. You're going to put the square side of the plug at the top, the round side at the bottom. You'll plug this in, plug it into your power, and your light will come on. You'll flip to power. You should have a green light on the front. If you have a red light, The first thing you'll want to do is pop the top open. Sometimes the paper can get jostled around in transport, so just pop the top open and pull that paper through a little more and close it and see if that helps your light turn back to green. If not, try removing the paper roll. See if there's an empty paper roll cartridge at the bottom and put that paper roll back in. As a reminder with that paper roll, you always want to make sure that your paper is feeding from underneath. You want to set up your printer first so that when you power on your iPad, it will connect automatically to your printer. These are paired together, so if you've got a connectivity issue, remember to check the number on the back of your iPad with the number on the top of your printer. So you'll just plug in your iPad or power it on if you're not going to plug it in, and make sure to put the base together. You'll need to push this round stand into the round bottom. And remember, you have to use a little more pressure than you think. Just snap it in, and then you'll attach this by pressing the two green handles to the back of the iPad. Remember to make sure that your camera is at the top left, facing away from you, so it's facing the voter. You'll also slide in this ID tray right underneath the camera. You'll snap it in so that the camera is facing the ID tray. When you open the app, if you press scan voter ID, you should be able to see the lines of the voter ID tray where the voter can place their driver's license only barcode up so that it will scan. If the voter presents a different form of ID, you won't be able to scan the barcode. You'll have to enter that manually. So to power on the poll pad, you'll press the power button in the top corner if it's not already on. If you connect it to power before you power on, it should power on automatically. You shouldn't have any problems. But in the event that it doesn't, just press the top button next to the camera to power it on. You'll see an Apple logo on a black screen. It will power on. You'll see a welcome screen, and you'll press the circle home button. Then you'll launch the app at the bottom of the home screen, and you'll press get started. That's where you'll be able to either scan the barcode or manually entry. You'll enter their name, search, pull them up. A few reminders, because this is a primary runoff election, so it'll be a little different than what you saw in the primary election. You will want to be sure that you read all of the prompts that it gives you once you've selected that voter's name. If they have a party affiliation that is not in the runoff, so if you're at an R1 and they voted in maybe the Democratic primary in March, they will not be able to vote in the Republican runoff in July, and so their name will not be able to be selected to vote. And so you'll want to make sure that you read all the prompts. The prompts will tell you what to say to the voter if you need help explaining it. If the voter is allowed to vote, you'll just click through like normal. It will tell you instructions. You'll also see that maybe your screen looks a little different sometimes. Maybe there's a colored bar at the top or a blacked out bar, whether or not they're allowed to vote. Just be sure to follow the prompts. If you have any questions about that on Election Day, we're always here to help you with that. We can look into our ePulse, our database for these, and see if we can help you in any way. If that voter is maybe at the wrong polling location, you'll want to print directions to their location. So you'll want to make sure your MiFi device is set up and ready to go so that you're able to have that internet connectivity. You'll just power on the MiFi, plug it in, and set it out in a place that gets cell phone signal. So if you have Verizon and you don't have cell phone signal in the basement of your church polling location, your MiFi device won't have a cell phone signal either. So maybe try putting it by a door or in a window, and that will help get service to your poll pad. In the event that your poll pad is not printing directions, it's not pulling them up, or it's not speaking to your printer, let us know and we can provide directions to that voter, or you can give them the address, which will be included in your black and yellow bin. So to turn off the iPad, you'll once again press the power button just to darken the screen. In the past, we've asked you to send these back to us powered off, but the vendor that pulls the data off of these on election night has asked that they not be powered off. It's an extra step for them, and so just go ahead and keep it on and darken the screen. Take the ID tray off and slide it back into the container. You'll unclip your poll pad and tuck it back into screen facing the foam. You'll pull this apart, set it at the very bottom of that round cutout. This acts as the lid for that cutout. And you'll place your printer back into the square cutout. Be sure before you return this that you've wiped down both or all 5 of your styluses and placed them back. The green ones go into the stylus cutout, the little circle in the center, and your rubber banded 3 voter styluses, they don't have to come back to us rubber banded, that's okay. They can just go in that cutout right in front of the printer. All right, so just to close up, we've got a few things that we'd like to hit on or remind you about that are pertinent to this runoff election in our current times. And so you might have remembered Greg mentioned, as well as I mentioned with the poll pad, that this is a runoff election, and so there are some rules about what's called crossover voting. So in very simple terms, you're going to receive a poster in your material, but in very simple terms, if someone voted Republican in the primary in March, they can only vote Republican in the primary runoff, and so that's the R1 or R2 ballot styles. If someone voted in the Democratic primary in March, they cannot cross over to vote in the Republican primary or the primary runoff in the July election. The same goes the other way. If they voted Republican in District 6, they cannot vote in the District 6 commissioner runoff race for the Democratic Party. Those rules are in place just to keep the election the same as the primary, so that those votes are the same. If you've got questions about that, it can sometimes be complicated, especially on election day, maybe hour, what feels like hour 20, please give our election office a call on election day, and we're happy to walk you through that. We're also happy to explain that to a voter if they don't quite understand. Also, a few notes about the difference between what we do in Madison County versus what you might have heard Greg speak about in that general training video given to us by the Secretary of State's office. You will need to arrive at the polling locations at 6 o'clock, not 6:30 like Greg said, 6 o'clock. This just gives us time to make sure everything is in order. We've got some different requirements with the coronavirus prevention, all of your supplies, and that just gives us time to make sure we've got everything set up and ready to go. So you'll need to arrive at 6 o'clock. You'll also might have noticed that Greg talked about signing in on those paper books. We don't use those because we have our poll pad, but you will still need to sign that worker's oath. If you've got a poll watcher, they'll also need to sign the poll watcher's oath on those forms or on those books and slip them back into the envelopes that they are assigned to go in. All those instructions are on that yellow envelope or on the labeled envelopes. You'll just need to go back into that for the Board of Registrars. You also might have heard Greg mention orange stickers on provisional ballots. In Madison County, we tear the top corner of those provisional ballots. It just helps us make sure that they don't go through the machine on election day. You might have sometimes encountered a voter, you give them a provisional ballot, they make their selections, and all of a sudden they're gone and they're about to put their ballot through the machine. If you tear that corner before you give them the ballot, that prevents the machine from taking it. So that's what we do in Madison County. Don't use the orange stickers, be sure to tear off the top corner. So as our final wrap up, I just want to let you know some exciting news. We're going to end on a good note. You're going to make an additional $25 for working in the runoff and general election in November. The Secretary of State has given that money as kind of a hazard pay or as a thank you for working in the times of these extra requirements that we have due to the coronavirus. We're so appreciative that you are doing this, you're serving your community in this way. And we would just want to thank you with that little bit of extra money on top of what we hope is our endless words of thanks to you. So once again, if you've got any questions or any concerns that I can help with, please be sure to give us a call or an email, and I'll get back with you about that, or I'll be sure to answer them however I can. Thank you so much.